Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping conclude bilateral talks on a rather friendly note, with both sides stressing on the need to further ties between the national based on mutual trust, respect and sensitivity. PM Modi emphasized the need for friendship between two countries, while President Xi Jinping called for the dragon and the elephant to come together. A United States federal court has ruled that President Donald Trump's tariffs are illegal, and the leader excessively declared national emergency to justify his trade policy. For now, the tariffs remain in place, though mid-October, allowing the parties to take the case to the Supreme Court. India's GDP grows 7.8% in April to June quarter, the fastest pace in 5 quarters compared to 6.5% in the same period last time. Service and government spending propel growth, manufacturing is largely flat and mining growth contracts. Stocks on Wall Street fell on Friday as investors booked profits following a new S&P 500 record and steady Nvidia earnings. Asian markets opened lower, with GIFT Nifty indicating a positive open for the Indian market. Oil prices steady after capping a monthly drop, with traders focusing on concerns over potential geopolitical tensions. Gold prices rise as US inflation data reinforce expectations of rate cut. Hello, good morning. You've tuned into Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. I'm Vinny Motiwala, coming live from the Mumbai News Centre. Interesting day, and last week where we saw pressure coming in for the Nifty. Today what we're watching out for is at least a slight bit of a positive start. On that note, let's look at what the Asian markets are doing and what is the cue that we're picking up from there. Now, Asian markets overall largely mixed, that would what I would call it, right? Given that we're seeing some bit of a rise coming in for Hang Seng and Taiwan index, which are managing to hold on to good gains. But what is not doing well? ASX 200, the Japanese index, that is Nikkei, that is not managing to hold on to gain. So we're seeing a bit of a mixed opening that's coming for the Asian markets. A lot of talks, that are going on, especially given that the US court is saying that ruling of Trump tariffs, that the word is coming on that front. So uncertainty still continues on the tariff front, right? But Indian markets, we do have a lot of positive data points that have come in as well. As of now, some bit of a cue for the Indian markets. The positives are 33-point uptick is what we're watching out for. On that note, what are the other factors that will be impacting our Indian markets? We have a team of research joining in with us to set us up for trade, tell you which are the important stocks to watch out for as well in today's trading session. And, let me start first with the trade setup for the day, right? Like I was mentioning, US that closed lower. We had the inflation data point that came in as well from the US. So markets are reacting on that front. When you look at 5 days trading session, we saw FIIs, they sold around 8,300 crores, while DIIs were buyers of around 11,400 crores. Now, important cues, that are impacting our market or will impact our market or will react to that is going to be Prime Minister Narendra Modi's comments that came in from the SCO summit. Prime Minister Modi as well as President Xi Jinping, their comments side bit positive, right? So not much of a worry over there. India's Q2 GDP, good numbers came in over there. So that is something that is a positive reaction maybe we could watch out for on that note. US retail inflation, that's the data point. Other than that, Prime Minister Modi is likely to meet President Putin. So key updates, if anything, comes in on that front. Also today, we do have, the auto data that will come in as well for sales data for the month of August. So we'll be seeing auto companies reacting to that. And we have the manufacturing PMI data, HSBC manufacturing PMI data that is expected today as well. Now, Nifty obviously last week slipped 2%. Steepest fall that we saw in 5 months, but implied open as of now because of these cues. Slight but positive, 33-point uptick is what we are watching out for. But let's move on that note and go across to Sudarshan, who is joining in with us to tell us, the cues in the world of F&O now. What are we watching out for? Good morning, Sudarshan.
Good morning, Vinny. So I'll give you just 3 headlines from the data that we are getting over the weekend and last week. So first headline that we may continue to see a range bound of trade. Second, FI selling has only increased. In the month of August, we saw FI selling more than rupees 46,000 crore. But good part was DIs have bought more than rupees 90,000 crore. And last is FI long exposure is at multi-month lows. On Friday, we saw long exposure has slipped to around 8.6%. So if there is any positive news flow, I won't be surprised if there is a sharp short covering. Now talking about the Friday session, we saw Nifty slipping below the all-important level of 24,500, and at the end, it closed near day's low. And along with Reliance, we saw like weakness in financials also. That was the reason Nifty Bank also slipped, and even weakness was seen in Nifty IT. As far as today's session is concerned, GIFT Nifty is indicating a start with minor gains. On Friday, in the cash market, we saw FI selling more than 8,000 crore, but it was fully offset by DIs, which have bought more than rupees 11,000 crore. Even in the index futures, we saw FI selling more than rupees 1,200 crore, and they have added minor long positions of 1,600 contracts. But if you see short position addition, there we saw addition of more than 8,000 contracts. And as I told you, FI long exposure now slipped to 8.6%. Take a look at the options data. On the call side, two options were very healthy, 24,500 and 24,550. They have seen a huge option build-up, but there was a sharp fall in the premium. So it tells you that it's very difficult for Nifty to cross the level of 24,500, at least at this point. As far as the put options were concerned, 24,400 and 24,450 options were healthy. And there we saw option build up, but at the same time, there was a minor addition, there was a minor increase in the premium. Now, support for Nifty, 24,400. If we slip below that, next support comes around 24,330. Resistance, 24,687. Three stocks, Reliance Industry, AGM announcements were very positive, so I won't be surprised if there is buying. M&M, it was weak ahead of monthly auto sales. And lastly, ITC continued to see buying on the news flow related to GST.
Okay, so Darshan, thank you so much for that. Keeping an eye on the stocks over there, as well as in terms of the support, as well as the resistance levels. But let's move on and go across to Gaurav, who's here to list out which are the important stocks to watch out for in today's trading session. Good morning, Gaurav.
Well, good morning. First, let's talk about IndusInd Bank. A negative news flow is what we can say here, because now shareholders have rejected promoters' bid to nominate an additional nominee director on the board. 54% of the shareholders voted against this resolution, as proxy advisor had raised some concerns and observations. Other than that, RBL Bank is in focus because now board has approved fundraising in the tune of 6,500 crore rupees. It will be 3,500 crore rupees via QIP and 3,000 crore rupees via debt securities. Now remember, this is an enabling approval from the board. NCC Limited is in focus because company has received an order worth 788 crore rupees, and this order is specifically in the water division of the company. BML is also in focus, and this is because company has received an order worth 80 crore rupees for utility track vehicles from railways. Aurobindo Pharma, this company is also in focus today, and the reason being US FDA recently concluded its inspection at one of the facilities in Telangana, and they have given Form 483 with 5 observations. And lastly, let's also focus on Ather Energy, because company has unveiled its EL platform, where they will be launching their next generation scooter platform built for versatility, scalability and cost optimization during the Ather Community Day 2025. So definitely all these stocks are going to be on focus today.
Okay, Gaurav, thank you so much for that. But let's talk about an important data point that came in on Friday. India's GDP, what we saw for Q1, came in much higher than expected at 7.8%. The CNBC TV18 poll was expecting a growth of 6.8%. Lata is joining in with us to give us the fine print on this one. Lata, good morning. This number is so exciting. What are we watching out for now? What were the factors here that came in?
Well, actually, we must know how GDP is collected. The NSO, National Statistics Organization, collects GDP at current prices. So, at today's prices, the nominal GDP has worked out at 8.8%. And then they take out the inflation part and get the real GDP, which is 7.8. Now, how do you deflate it? You use a mix of WPI and CPI. That's what the NSO does. It takes 60% WPI and 40% of CPI and deflates it. Now, WPI in the last, April, May, June, was 0.28%. It was even minus in June. Because of this very low deflator, the NSO has deflated by only 1%. 8.8 has become 7.8. But India's GDP actually comprises a large component of services. Services contribute 66%, and we don't have a services deflator. Other countries have PPI, Producer Price Index, so they have a services deflator. We don't have. So at a time when WPI is very low, like minus, our real GDP tends to look very good. Now, having said that there is an overstatement, we have to admit that the numbers are very good. Even if you looked at nominal GDP, my poll threw up 8%. We have done 8.8. So it is better than expected. And if you looked at only the services category, that's grown by 9.3. The government services part has grown by 9.8. It's called public administration, etc. That's because the government capex was front-loaded. Government capex grew by 52% if you looked at first quarter over previous first quarter. So there is a lot of positive news, but there is a bit of overstatement.
Okay, positive news, a bit of an overstatement. But Lata, thank you so much for explaining us in details, how this works as well, but keeping an eye out on any reaction that comes in on that front on the market. On that note, we're going to slip into a very short break. And after the break, we'll get you the updates from PM Modi's visit to China. What more comments came in on that front? Stay tuned in. Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned into Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now let's move on. We have comments that came in from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who met the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And this happened on Sunday. This was ahead of the SCO summit, with both the leaders acknowledging a positive momentum in India and China ties. Parikshit is joining in with us to bring us those details. Parikshit.
Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping had a 55-minute-long meeting on the sidelines of the SCO summit in Tianjin, China. CNBC TV 18 has learned that the meeting was a positive one and is likely to create further momentum in India-China relations. The leaders spoke about taking the overall economic engagement forward. Discussions took place on the importance of the India-China relationship for global peace and harmony. The leaders noted the importance of people-to-people ties and that the India-China direct flights will resume soon, and resuming all categories of visas is important as well. Border trade and pilgrimage via Kailash Mansarovar has already begun. Xi Jinping emphasized that India and China are ancient civilizations and important members of the global south. The Chinese president said that it is the right choice for both nations to be friends and have good relations, be partners who enable each other's success, and that the dragon and the elephant should come together. PM Modi conveyed to Xi that India is committed to advancing relations based on mutual trust, respect, and sensitivity. Experts CNBC TV 18 spoke to said India must focus on resolving the boundary issue as a prerequisite to normalizing economic relations. China watchers in India have said that we cannot forget that China has recalled hundreds of workers from Apple and Foxconn factories in India because they don't want manufacturing to shift to India. While stable political ties will give positive momentum to economic relations, experts say that at best we can expect India and China to normalize relations to a level that existed before the Galwan clashes in 2020. However, India will continue approaching ties with China with caution due to the boundary dispute and China's close ties and linkages with Pakistan.
Absolutely, Parikshit. Thank you so much for that. But now, during the near 55-minute bilateral conversation between the two leaders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserted that there was peace and stability on the borders, while President Xi Jinping said importance for the dragon and the elephant to come together. Listen in.
हमारे स्पेशल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स के बीच बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट के संबंध में सहमति बनी। कैलाश मानसरोवर यात्रा फिर से शुरू की। दोनों देशों के बीच डायरेक्ट फ्लाइट भी फिर से शुरू की जा रही है।
We both shoulder the historical responsibility of improving the well-being of our two peoples, promoting the solidarity and rejuvenation of developing countries, and propelling the progress of human society. It is the right choice for both countries to be friends who have good neighbourly and amicable ties, partners who enable each other's success, and to have the dragon and the elephant dance together.
Meanwhile, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri affirms on what my colleague Parikshit had to say and added both nations took note of the successful disengagement at the border. Listen in.
It is critical that India and China grow and cooperate if there is to be an Asian century and a functioning multipolar world order with a multipolar Asia at its heart. The boundary issue also figured in the discussions. Both leaders took note of the successful disengagement last year and the maintenance of peace and tranquility in the border regions since then. In voicing certain principles related to this issue, the Prime Minister underlined the need for peace and tranquility on the border areas for continued and smooth development of bilateral relations.
And moving on, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold a bilateral meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin today after his address at the SCO. And, this session is going to be happening in China. Now, the meeting assumes significance of it as it comes at a time when India is under relentless pressure from the Trump administration to reduce its purchase of Russian crude oil. Let's also listen in to what the former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan and former US Trade Representative Michael Froman had to say in terms of the current strained relationships that we're seeing between India and US.
I don't think it's serious. It's more a signal. I don't think that in the longer run, India would prefer China to the United States. In survey after survey, you find that Indians really like the United States. But I think the Indian leadership is basically saying, make up your mind. Which way do you want to go? Because otherwise we can strengthen other alternatives. I don't think India gains a lot by buying Russian oil. Actually, before the war, it was accounting for about 2% of Indian purchases. India would be happy to go back to that. The discount on Russian oil is really quite small at this point. I think if the United States, through a backdoor channel asked, please stop buying Russian oil, India would be pretty happy to do that.
This is Modi's first trip to China in 7 years, and it's a direct reaction to the fact that the U.S. imposed these tariffs. They don't feel they can rely on the United States as a strategic partner going forward, and they're exploring their other options, with China and the other members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India is a very proud country, and I think it is certainly sending the signal that it is not willing to be pushed around by the United States and not be treated as one of the worst economic partners of the United States, certainly. And so it's wondering why it's facing a 25% tariff because of the oil it's buying from Russia, where China, which buys more oil from Russia, is not facing such a tariff. And I think it is sending that signal. It is a signal to the U.S. and a very important domestic political signal for Modi that they are not going to be taken for granted by the United States going forward.
And let's just take a look at what happened in the US markets on Friday, right? Wall Street ended Friday's trading session lower. The Dow fell 92 points, while the S&P 500 lost more than 40 points in Friday's trading session. Now, the tech-heavy Nasdaq also was the biggest underperformer actually, and shedding nearly 250 points. Even with Friday's losses, when you look at it, the indices closed out the month of August with solid gains. There was no doubt on that front. Now, Dow logged a gain of more than 3%, advancing in the month of August. S&P 500 up nearly 2% as well, and Nasdaq saw gains of 1.6%. Meanwhile, new inflation data showed a rising price was still a risk ahead, going forward into the next month as well. That's the month of September. CNBC's Steve Leisman is joining in with us to give us more details on the numbers and what the Fed's next move could be.
The Fed's preferred inflation indicator coming in right on target, which was the good news. But the bad news is that it came in right on target, and that means it was higher. Take a look at this board and tell me the economists don't get it right once in a while. There's the estimate on the right. There's the actual on the left. Headline rise rose 2.6% year on year on target and increased to 2.9% if you use just the core, up a tenth. But both have now risen for 3 straight months, and that really may be the salient issue here. Inflation has not shown the full-blown effects of the tariffs, which many economists worry are still to come. Administration officials largely contend it won't happen. Despite modest increases, though, it's clear inflation is moving away from the Fed's 2% target. On the plus side, real income was up a decent 0.2%. Nothing to write home about, but not a crash either, reversing last month's goose egg. And real spending rose a trend like 0.3%. So that's okay. Where are we on the Fed probabilities? 88% for that first cut. That's a touch stronger this morning after this data. 48% in October. So it's not priced in at second cut until December. The result of the data was to boost the Atlanta Fed's GDP now. Get this number, 3.5%, countering some of the talk of a weakening economy where the Fed needs desperately to cut rates and is behind the curve. You don't see it in the jobless claims number or in the GDP number. The tracking data suggests the economy may be accelerating here, and so is inflation. So this is a real increasing the quandary for the Federal Reserve here, guys.
Thanks so much for that. But on that note, we're going to slip into a very short break. After the break, we'll get to the cues in the world of commodities. Stay tuned in for that. Welcome back to Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now it's time to go across to Manisha Gupta, who's here to give us the details in terms of what is happening in the world of FNOs. Which commodity is she keeping an eye out on this morning? Good morning, Manisha.
Good morning, Vinny. I'm looking at the precious metals to begin with because we've seen very strong gains onto this one for the month of August and especially in the previous week where we saw all-time highs in gold and silver, both of these commodities in the Indian markets here. So even as we start the month of September, we are doing that on a stronger note, especially for silver, which is trading at a 14-year highs in the international markets, has seen a 6% of gains in the month of August. And we are looking at $40 an ounce for the global markets, and we're looking at 120,000 rupees per kg in the Indian markets as well. Well, the investor demand has been strong. Industrial demand also estimated at record highs for this year. And the gold-silver ratio is the highest in 7 months as well, which has been quite supportive. I also want to talk about the crude oil prices because we seem to be extending declines here. August was the first monthly decline after 4 months of gains for the crude oil prices. Well, it has to do with weak demand concerns, excess supply. The street will also watch out for the OPEC and allies meeting on 6th of September. And then it's going to be about the SCO summit in focus, where India, China, and Russia are participating. Statements coming out from that also will impact crude prices.
Okay, Manisha, thank you so much for that. So keeping an eye on all those commentary that is coming in there. And like you can see on your screens as well, we have President Xi Jinping who is there. PM Modi has also arrived at the SCO summit, and we'll be watching out for his session and address that will be happening soon as well. As of now on the screens, we have President Xi Jinping. And post that, we'll be waiting out for comments that will coming from him. He's planning to meet the Russian president as well, Putin. So that will be key to watch out for. And we have leaders sitting in over there at the SCO summit, which is the 25th Shanghai Cooperation Organization Head of State Council Summit in China. So that is important to watch out for. In updates coming in, you have the Prime Minister Modi, who is sitting there as well as of now, before he starts his address and session. Okay, on that note, we are absolutely out of time on this edition of Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Thank you so much for tuning in. Up next, your Bazaar Morning Call.